Here, we're putting monkeys in the game. Yay. And there are monkeys now. What did that do to the game? It made more 100% more monkeys. Seasons change, and so do we. There was a song about that.
Sure.
Anyway, I've noticed, though, that this does happen in games. Games similar to cozy games that we were talking about in the first one, actually.
Yes.
where seasons will indeed change, and when it does, it changes the landscape in its entirety. In addition to games like Stardew Valley or any of those other cozy games, I had mentioned to you at one point about like Banjo-Kazooie having Click Clock Woods, and the idea that you could actually change between different seasons and do things in one season that would affect the landscape and areas that you could get to in others. So it has been utilized in one way, shape, or form in games before, but I wanted to talk about it in terms of tabletop gaming. And
Fair.
The idea that we don't usually discuss the idea of seasons and how that influences the game and the characters and their journey as they move through this. If you think of seasons as time, they're moving through time in some ways, and so the seasons change to match. What would you like? Have you ever used seasons or seasonal changes in some way in a game?
I don't think I've used a seasonal change in a game.
Okay.
I've used a change in landscape theoretically in game.
Okay.
My players never made it to the point where that would have happened, so that didn't really count. But, you know.
Oh.
I've used interestingly strange environmental details in game. I've made a forest fire in game. That was fun. That wasn't the season, though. That was a fire elemental that went on a rampage. So no, I have not used seasonal changes in a game myself.
Okay. That's good. Maybe the power in your hands would be ill-fitting. I don't know if that would be a good idea. I think that the most innocuous version of this, if we're talking about the lightest idea, is to remind the players of the season that they are in and remind them of how it is changing as they are going through, especially if they are on a journey. I vaguely remember, although it was not really a real point of contention, that during one of my D&D campaigns, the DM would kind of mention, like, because of how long we were on a certain journey, that, you know, you're noticing that there's starting to get a chill in the air, or the leaves are changing color, or something to that degree. An aesthetic change, not really a mechanical one at all, but one that kind of sets scene for you about the place that you're in, and makes you start thinking about the fact that time is indeed moving along in a way that's not just like, the date today is Tuesday, April 15th, you know, like...
I've never kept track of dates like that in games.
A general idea of that isn't a bad idea, just so that people are kind of aware, like, I understand that, like, you have all the time in the world, but there is a continuous change that's happening. There's a continuous timeline that we're working on, and
I find it hard to
show
just do the progress of time in a game, in a tabletop game in general. Personally, like, I'm bad at, like, oh, how many hours have you guys spent out of doing things? How long have you been doing stuff? You played a game with me even kind of recently,
yeah,
and it's like, I guess it's like the end of the day.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's like, how do you tell the passage of time?
Right.
When half of it takes the course of 6-second intervals and turns in combat, and the rest of it is just kind of hand wave.
And how do you really keep track of the days and the calendar and all of that? It's like, oh, happy birthday. Wait, it's my birthday? Yeah, no, I checked the calendar today. We've come across
That's kind of like keeping track of the phases of the moon, for instance.
That's also something that you probably wouldn't bother to do until it is relevant to the conversation, like, oh, it's a blood moon. Yeah,
and that's the thing. A lot of the time, that stuff isn't always relevant. So keeping up with the seasonal stuff isn't really something I feel like on a lot of people's minds. Unless the setup is, hey, so the season is going to be changing soon. We need to get ready before winter.
That's true.
And if you set it up in a premise like that, or hey, winter is starting to end, we need to get out there on the ice before summer, the summer months melt all of it.
Right, or you know that you have to get over this lake or something, and you know that it will eventually freeze over. Or that you can figure it out that way. I think that it also might be useful to think of in terms of foraging and scavenging and
Sure.
any kind of resources like that. You're going out hunting. It's going to change the landscape a lot if you're doing it in summer or doing it in winter.
Right. Hunting in winter is actually probably much easier.
That's
Animals
true.
don't blend in as well. They leave footprints visibly in the snow.
Right.
Um,
Foraging, though.
Whereas foraging in the wintertime is going to be a lot tougher because most of the plants are dead at that point, or don't have berries or nuts on them at that point in time because they've gone into sleep mode, essentially.
Right, or they're buried under snow, so you've got to...
Or they're buried under feet of snow.
Yeah, which is interesting, especially if you're playing something like a ranger, because, your favorite environment or anything that you're using for tracking is going to be greatly affected, actually, by the seasons. Your ability to actually track animals or anything like that.
I would even, not just for ranger, but like if you were doing a D&D in this case, say you want to do any type of foraging, survival check in the wintertime, I'd say, cool, take disadvantage.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to find a lot. It's going to be a lot harder to find a lot.
Certainly.
Or anything. And then if you want to say hunt in the winter, I'd be like, cool, get us, a advantage on your hunting because any animal that is out there is going to probably leave a track.
That's true. I think that another thing that might be useful to talk about is, in similar fashion to games like Stardew Valley, is that in different seasons, there are also different events and different celebrations that go on at this time, too. And it might be worth noting that, if I'm getting toward harvest season, if I'm getting toward autumn, there are probably harvest festivals. And that might be something that you encounter when you go to towns, when you go into villages, and they're doing this. And if that's something that you need to interact with, or if that's something that leads to quest lines, that that there are characters that are going to be there, maybe important ones that are going to be at the Harvest Festival, that those are ways that you can introduce certain adventure hooks or elements by the fact that the seasons are changing, and when it does, there are going to be other celebrations, and people are moving around. People are changing, where they are in the world and in relation to each other, and have different needs, even.
Yep, and then prices for things will change too, for instance.
That's true.
Although that's getting a little bit more deep than I think you want to probably get with, like, a tabletop game in a lot of cases.
Unless you're playing Economy Simulator.
Yeah. I don't know, here's another thought. Seasonal changes for, like, tabletop board games.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. It'd
be interesting to see what you could do with that in the case that maybe it doesn't change the board, or maybe the board's got two sides to it. One's summer and one's spring and summer, and the other is fall and winter. That'd be a cool concept because then you have different things. But could it be a resource management, or could it be some other type of game that takes advantages of the different seasons?
Could you go with me on this? Catan, but Catan has a timer, and every certain number of turns, your season changes, and it affects the resources that you actually get from those tiles.
Sure, I don't see why not. Seasonal variant, let's go.
It would be an interesting thing. The one that I do come up with, it's not necessarily a seasonal change, but it is the board changing itself, is, did you ever play Forbidden Island?
But I know what it is. So.
Yeah, and we've talked to the creator, so we've talked to Matt Leacock. Forbidden Island has like a timer where the water level rises, and when the water level rises, whole tiles of the map start to degrade. They go away. They fall into the sea. They get waterlogged, and it makes the map change as the water rises. You could probably do something like that with seasons, where as summer comes in, the waters rise, and then they descend in certain seasons, and then they rise again. I guess the big part of that, though, is, does it actually service the game itself, or is it just a gimmick that you put in? Because if it doesn't actually lend itself to the game being played, then it's not really worth putting in. You want it to
Right.
enhance
It's
the
just
game.
bloat at that point.
Yeah, it's another mechanic you did just because why not? Here, we're putting monkeys in the game. Yay! And there are monkeys now. What did that do to the game? It made more 100% more monkeys, you know?
100% more monkeys.
That's what we all need in these games, I swear.
Yes.
I do like the idea, though, of the changing of the seasons really starting to kind of affect how the landscape itself just in general changes, and that the people in the world are going to have different desires, different needs, different thoughts about what they're looking at, especially for the upcoming season. If we're getting into fall, they're going to be starting to think about harvest time, and they're going to be starting to think about battening down the hatches because winter is right around the corner. As spring comes in, people are going to start thinking about plowing fields. They're going to do these certain things at certain times, and it will also change, like, what people need, what people want adventures for in the first place, what you might be doing for them, and also, like, what kind of time frame they're going to need for you to do those things. That aspect could be interesting, not just from a narrative sense, but you could use it mechanically. You could use that to determine advantage, disadvantage, what kinds of items and things you find in the woods. If you investigate or do like some kind of a hunting check or, scavenging or something like that, investigation, the seasons can make for a good way to determine what you might find in any given time. Yeah, no, there could be a mechanical component, but just in general as a framing for the world, I think the idea of knowing that there is a continuous change, like a cycle to the world that you're in, makes it feel more lived in, makes it feel more ergonomic. That's not the word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for?
Alive.
There you go. That's what.
There you go. Definitely not ergonomical.
No, it's not ergonomical. I didn't turn the trees into one of those special seats that you see.
It could definitely be worth it in the right campaign, in the
Sure.
right game, in the right type of story.
Mm.
And obviously, if things are taking place over a long amount of time, you could include those if it makes sense to, like, not skip over the whole thing.
Sure.
Yeah. But I feel like if it doesn't lend itself to actually adding anything to your game, then you're probably not going to do it. Like, yes, now it's just same thing, but pretend there's a layer of snow everywhere. And in the case that there is a layer of snow everywhere, it should impact the mechanics and different things of the game. But the question is whether players would enjoy that impact or not as well.
Right. I can kind of see where it would be detrimental to the player's experience, only because if there's a layer of snow, chances are it's going to affect your movement speed, I would imagine. Or you'd have to have special equipment. I'd have to have, like, snowshoes so that it doesn't impede my movement speed, and then I gotta go find those, and I gotta buy those, and I gotta equip them, and chances are if you have those on, then heavy armor is going to weigh you down, and you're still gonna fall through the snow, and you could get deep in the weeds if you wanted to, but it probably wouldn't service the storyline overall.
Right.
Maybe a light touch with the seasons to try and set stuff up and create more of a lived-in space. But
I would prefer using an entire environmental change than just a seasonal change personally.
Sure.
Oh, so what happens is we're going underwater to an undersea city. Things are going to be very different, especially in, like, Tabletop, where you can paint such elaborately different, extravagant worlds that
Sure.
just kind of a seasonal change is kind of mundane, probably, to a lot of people.
It's
Or a lot of these
possible.
worlds, it's like, oh yeah, ooh, great, it's spring now, cool, the flowers, cool. It's like, I could be visiting the moon right now.
That's true. And you could create fake seasons.
Yeah, you could definitely. Or I could be underground in a dwarven city right now.
Yeah, and they might not experience seasons at all.
Yeah, so I feel like seasonal changes in Tabletop, maybe not as important depending on the setting, but
Right.
definitely something to play around with. That and, like, weather effects. those are things that I definitely think are overlooked. But unless they add some layer of fun or challenge to a game, I can understand why.
It's tornado season.
Sharknado season.
It's Sharknado season. Perfect. I can't wait for Sharknado season. That lends itself to we'll have bullets. We'll have like the land sharks, but
There you go.
but they're in tornadoes now, and the townsfolk are
Great.
very worried. Happens every year, right around this time. There's something for your adventurers to deal with. Enjoy. If you out there have any interest in doing weather effects, or you've used them in interesting ways, seasonal effects, etc., please let us know in the comments down below, so that we can get some new ideas for the campaign we're probably never going to do. But, you know, might be useful for somebody else.
I'll have a campaign someday when I can sit down and write things down.
Perfect. Can't wait for it.
Yeah,
So
me too.
never